welcome everyone. We're going to take a couple minutes while people come in before we get started. But again, appreciate having you here today. So, and maybe we can actually have people, if you want to raise your hand, if this is your first SCORE webinar. See the raise hand down at the bottom? If this is your first webinar, you might want to raise your hand.
Well, right now we only have one attendee.
Person. Yeah.
Rochelle. Welcome, Rochelle. You see where it says participants, Bill?
Yeah, I see it. Yes.
And then you've got panelists and attendees?
Yep.
Okay. Over to you, Bill.
Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Bill Straubinger, and I'm going to be your host today. So let's take a look at. Let me first introduce Audrey. Audrey Halpern, as you can see, has 20 years of experience developing customized programs for employees on interpersonal and soft skills. She's worked in such industries as advertising, direct mail, finance. And she's developed programs in presentation skills, productivity, and also advanced sales skills. And her client list includes companies that you'll certainly recognize like American Express, FedEx, UPS, and also has worked with different county organizations and in New York City, and has worked in it for a number of colleges like CUNY, Stony Brook, John Jay, and Hofstra. I'm out of breath from that one. So again, Audrey, welcome. Let's talk about the SCORE for a minute. So if you want to go to that next slide.
Sure.
And I'm sure a lot of you, if you've been to SCORE webinars, are familiar with SCORE Westchester. They help small businesses through mentoring and education. There's 3 different areas that they're involved in. One is the confidential business mentoring. The other one is webinars and workshops, which we're doing right now. And they have an extensive online educational resources. So we primarily work with startups, small businesses that are just getting off the ground. And we have over 50 volunteer mentors. So if after this webinar, you want to get some more information or work with a mentor, please contact SCORE Westchester. Okay, next one, Audrey. All right, so how the webinar is going to work, everybody's going to be muted during the presentation. And then if you go to chat, if you have any questions, and I hope you will, just please put them in there and we'll get to them. If we might take some during the webinar, but we'll certainly get to them at the end. So just put those in and I'll be monitoring them and I'll send them off to Audrey. So without further ado, Audrey Halpern.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, SCORE, for inviting me today to talk about a very broad topic, strategies to manage interruptions and stay focused. Because it's such a broad topic and we only have about 50 minutes, I broke down some topics that I think are relevant for you. And of course, as Bill said, if you do have any questions around additional topics, reach out to SCORE and they will forward them to me. But we're going to talk about focus and concentration and our attention span, which when Raquel was on the call earlier, she said she had ants in her pants. Sometimes ants in her pants are good. Sometimes ants in her pants are distracting. So we're going to talk about the benefits for focus and concentration and the role that self-awareness plays, your own self-awareness. You might have heard of circadian rhythms. For those of you who have flown before, you've probably experienced jet lag. Circadian rhythms play a huge role in our attention and our focus. So we're going to talk about how that affects you. And then the distractions that you have on a daily basis. Most of you are familiar with multitasking, not so much anymore. It's really task switching and it doesn't bode well for your focus and concentration. And then we're going to talk about some productivity hacks. So there are a lot of new rules right now, right? Things are different. It means you're contending, if you are working from home, you're contending with different interruptions. And some of the strategies that we're going to talk about today help both at work and at home. It's important that we focus today on focus because most people don't have trouble focusing. They have trouble deciding. So we're going to talk about the difference between concentration, attention, and focus. So what's the difference? Well, while both focus and concentration are necessary for processing information, they're not exactly the same thing because concentration is the act or the process or our ability for concentrating. And it really just refers to your ability to sustain interest over a period of time. Attention is more of a complex process. It has a lot of different subcomponents to it. And then we have to talk about focus, which is a thinking skill. It allows us to begin a task without putting it off, without procrastinating, and then maintain that attention till we complete it. And attention is more than just focusing on completing a task. It's there's no attention part of the brain that you just sort of flip on. It involves a lot of very complex combinations of different cognitive processes. And no, this is not a science class, but it turns out that just attention isn't as simple as it seems. You know, when your second grade teacher said, Bill, pay attention, Raquel, focus. It's not as easy as that. So focus is this thinking skill. We want to maintain attention for extended periods of time. And again, it's just not always very easy to do. There's something called involuntary attention and voluntary attention. Involuntary attention isn't consciously controlled by us. It's this compelling stimuli in our environment. And you know, it's meant to help us fend off danger and find rewards. It allows us to react quickly, is what I'm saying, where voluntary attention is consciously controlled. It requires effort. It requires willpower. It requires intentional concentration. So again, you want to make sure that we understand what these different components look like and sound like. So let's talk about staying focused. it's been said that the greatest power of the human brain is its ability to concentrate on one thing for extended periods of time. Well, we could be busy doing 1,000 things, and a lot of them are just second nature to us, and we don't utilize one bit of concentration in doing so because maybe it's sort of a monotonous routine. When we talk about narrowing your focus, one thing that's helpful to help narrow our focus is lists. When we start to categorize things, when we start to make lists or outlines, we're drawing our attention sort of in this narrow focus to pinpoint a certain thing. So if you're working on a task, for example, that has a lot of detail in it, and those details, it's vital to get them right, you probably want to use some sort of a checklist or step by step. Another key component of focus is having a goal. That goal is that effective attention narrower. There's a risk of suffering a lot of tunnel vision and missing things. So take it slow. When you are trying to focus on something, sort of narrow your vision toward it. There was an experiment. I don't know if you're all familiar with this experiment. It's called the invisible gorilla experiment. Maybe you are familiar with it. But let me tell you what it looks like and sounds like, and this will give you an idea of what I'm talking about when we talk about focus. The participants were told to watch a video, and they were given a goal to count how many times, it was a basketball video, how many times the basketball was passed around. And they became so narrowly focused on the ball and counting the ball that they failed to see that there was this man dressed in a gorilla suit, sort of casually dancing around in the middle of the court. And what that tells us is, again, our focus, if it's on a particular goal, sort of narrows that down. Another way to broaden your attention and shift your focus is take it from yourself onto other people. Studies show that being other directed or in terms of thinking about we versus me opens up a lot of attention. So the best way that you can shift your focus then is to simply help somebody else with a problem. There are a lot of benefits to focus, and that's why I'm spending so much time talking about it. I thought I would throw some very unsettling statistics at you today. Trying to focus on more than one thing at a time reduces your productivity by as much as 40%. That's staggering. That's the cognitive equivalent of pulling an all-nighter, for those of you who are still young enough to remember all-nighters. The average desk job employee loses 2.1 hours a day due to distractions and interruptions, and that adds up to a full day of work every week. Staggering. On average, employees who do the majority of their work on computers are distracted every 10.5 minutes. Well, that's pretty much all of us these days. Being distracted by incoming calls can lower an employee's IQ by as much as 10 points. Again, a distraction. It's not all bad news. Obviously, I'm here today to talk to you about, all the good things that we can do. 44% of all of our distractions are mostly self-inflicted. And another 23% come from emails. And that means for us that you have complete control to cut out or at least drastically reduce at least 67% of all the productivity killing distractions that derail your entire workday. And I guess that's why you're here today. So focusing allows your subconscious to do all the work. Think about it this way. When you learned to ride a bike, what you were doing was your subconscious began to took over, right? Once you started learning it, and it helped you learn. Well, this is the same thing with your everyday tasks. Once you begin focusing solely on one task, your subconscious helps you to do things more quickly. Now, there are limitations. Obviously, we talk a lot about benefits, but excessive focus is probably not a good thing. And that's one of the reasons that leaders in organizations fail to notice important facts and relevant information as it pertains to some of their decisions. So our inability to notice, among other things, information or biases regarding information sources, or even to the point that it contributes to employee higher levels of employee burnout. So we want to make sure that we're using our focus, in such a way that it's going to be positive. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk to you today about effectiveness and efficiency. And I think a lot of us confuse the two, but effectiveness is the ability to successfully produce intended results. It's sort of personal in that way. Efficiency is the successful application of effort without wasting time or energy. It's universal. So what do we think? Do we want to be effective, or we want to be efficient? Anyone want to weigh in? You can go ahead and use chat. What do you think? Should we focus more on being effective, or should we focus more on being efficient? Oh, we can't use chat. Okay, never mind. The answer is we want to be effective. And through effectiveness, efficiency just sort of follows along. So when we start to be focused on our effectiveness, then we, by just happenstance, we become more efficient. So one of the things we want to be able to do is focus. And we talked about that. And a lot of us find it easy to focus. Some of us do not, but focus is good if you stay alert, if you break your goals and break tasks into smaller components, if you take short breaks and then get back to work, that's good. You'll know that focus is needed. And I'm one of those people who daydream, not so much regularly, but I sort of drift off. If you daydream regularly and you cannot tune out distractions, if you lose track of your progress, sometimes you're doing things automatically without thinking, and that's fine. But the reality is that 47% of our day can be spent lost in our thoughts. So we want to make sure that your focus is well placed. You don't want to be on autopilot. A lot of us go through our day on autopilot. Being on autopilot means you're not fully present, and you're not really noticing those opportunities and those choices around you. So, you can't be creative when you're on autopilot. You can't plan something new or respond appropriately if you're just doing the mechanics, if you're just doing things by rote. So let's diagnose some poor time management. There are a lot of symptoms. Maybe some of them you recognize. Maybe some of them are new to you. Absent-mindedness, where did I put my keys? If it's just a one-off, sure. But if it's happening all the time and you're always rushing around, That is a definite sign of poor time management. Procrastination, we'll talk about that too. Being disorganized can really disrupt your time management because you're constantly looking for things. Oh, I know where it is. I know exactly where it is on my desk, but you're shuffling all these papers around. Low energy. Oh, and ineffective delegation. I think my personal opinion is delegation, when done right, when done correctly, is the number one time management tool that any manager can have. And again, when we talk about effective delegation, it's not just telling someone, here, go staple this. It's much more involved and has different steps. Being reactive rather than proactive can be a definite sign or symptom of poor time management. Failure to communicate decisions, saying yes to everything. There are a lot of people out there who are people pleasers. You got to know what your boundaries are, and you got to set them not only for yourself, but for your boss and for other people. Saying yes to everything is going to burn you out quicker than almost anything and overload your plate. Poorly defined goals is another symptom of poor time management. We know about punctuality, and you always have that one friend who never shows up on time. Indecisiveness, and doing everything yourself, which goes along with delegating. But here's what a lot of us don't realize is that being a perfectionist is also a symptom of poor time management. Now, why might that be? Well, that's because you have to do everything perfectly, and that takes time, it takes effort. And so sometimes being a perfectionist is not necessarily the way to go when it comes to time management. So let's talk about how we can alter some of these issues with respect to poor time management, with respect to focus and concentration and attention, with respect to just being productive and effective in what it is that you do. Well, mindfulness. I'm sure that we've all heard mindfulness as this sort of new, way to be. But it's really just a matter of this state of mind where you're fully conscious and you're fully engaged in what is happening in the moment, even with the demands that happen within the moment. So it's really your ability, your capacity to avoid being distracted from what you're doing in the present moment. And the other component of mindfulness is doing it in such a way that it's non-judgmental. Now, mindfulness is very much a Buddhist concept. It is it's sort of the idea of avoid forgetting what you already know and remember to do what you need to do intentionally. That's sort of a vague description of the Buddhist concept, but the goal of mindfulness is not to stop thinking or to empty your mind. It's paying close attention to your physical um, sensations, your thoughts, and your emotions. And in order to see them more clearly without making a lot of assumptions or making up stories, because we tend to do that a lot. So what does that look like in the workplace in terms of mindfulness? Well, how often do you have conversations with people and that you can barely recall because you were too busy thinking about, the call that you have to make later on in the day, or paying too much attention to your inbox is forces you to put other needs before your own. It means that throughout the day, that the working day, at any one time, paying close attention in a non-judgmental way, whether it's in a meeting, whether you're focused on what the presenter is saying, like today, or just sitting at the computer wondering, hey, what am I going to make for dinner tonight? So we want to talk about the capacity for being mindful in a way that is going to be productive for you. Now, some of you will all recognize this next slide, or what we're going to talk about, our internal chatter, where we blame a lot of the things that go on in our world as a source of our distraction. The Buddhists, again, refer to something called the monkey mind, nothing to do with what's going on in our healthcare system right now, but the monkey mind refers to our mental capacity where we're engaging internally in constant chatter. And sometimes this internal chatter can be really helpful for working out problems. But typically, this chatter, this monkey mind, sounds like your mind reading off a laundry list of all those to-do items. Oh, I have to get to that. I have to get to that. Sometimes your mind recalls hurtful feelings that happened in the past, and now you're talking to someone who maybe you do trust, but your monkey mind is saying, gee, I'm not so sure because I got hurt before. Your monkey mind is judging what's happening in the present, which is the total opposite of mindfulness. And your mind is creating this catastrophic what if scenarios that happen. And a lot of that could be contributed or attributed to anxiety. A lot of our constant mental chatter, our internal chatter, can distract us from the things that are important. And it could actually lead to a lot of misunderstanding in a particular situation. So here's what we need to do. We need to talk back to our monkey mind. We need to calm it down by having a conversation when it is in full swing. Stop for a moment at least and listen to what it is saying. Why is it upset? What's all this ruckus about? And once you tune into that, then you want to be able to say, all right, is this internal chatter trying to remind me of something that needs to get done? If so, make a note of it and then schedule it so that your internal chatter doesn't need to worry about it any longer. Another thing is maybe your monkey mind, your internal chatter is anxious about something. Talk to it. Reassure that everything's going to be fine, whether it's a mantra or an affirmation. Maybe you conduct that, and this is not therapy, by the way, but maybe you conduct a worst case scenario with your internal chatter and come up with a contingency plan. Is your monkey mind voicing some sort of resentment over something? What's it trying to tell you? Because it is trying to tell you something. Now, there's a technique that we can use for helping you deal with the disparity between what your monkey mind thinks should be happening and what is actually happening. So if mindfulness is not cutting it for you, or you're just trying this out for size, there's something called the ABC technique. The A is for an activating event, that is something that's happening. B is for beliefs. Your monkey mind starts interpreting what's happening based on your beliefs. And then we have consequences. As a consequence of the thoughts that you're having about what just happened, you feel certain emotions. Now, for those of us who have not taken emotional intelligence classes before, the key to emotional intelligence is self-awareness. Well, one of the keys, there's 4, but one of them is self-awareness. So we want to be able to tame our internal chatter by using and applying this ABC technique to question the beliefs that your internal monkey mind is relying on in order to reach the conclusions what it's communicating to you. So this ABC technique, again, paired with this mindfulness, will help you to cut down on the disparity between what your internal chatter is saying should happen and what is actually happening. Now, somebody told me this really cool, I guess it's a technique, and we could try it together now. I'll talk you through it. It's the game of fives. And what you want to be able to do is pause your brain and pause your train of thought. And we could do this together right now. So you're in your environment, wherever that is. And I want you to notice 5 things in your environment. It could be 5 things you hear, 5 things you see, 5 things you smell. Okay? So in my environment, I have pens and highlighters. I have a globe. I have crystals on my desk. Yes, I'm one of those. I have a spray water bottle in case the dog barks too much. And I have what else do I have? Oh, and I have my eyeglass case. So those are 5 items that I'm noticing in my environment. And then what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to fully experience what we're seeing, if there's something that we're hearing, if we're smelling. And you could do this by pretending it's the first time that you've ever experienced that item or that sound or that smell. And the moment in which you do all of this, your attention is now placed in the present moment. And what happens is your monkey mind becomes sort of silent. So again, it's just another trick, another technique to use when you feel like you're overloaded or it's just too much for you. You could try the ABC technique, or you can try the game of 5. Just another one. Let's talk about multitasking, because I know that you're all doing it. You have a task and it just needs to get done, and you got it done because, hey, the deadline made the decision for you. And maybe you did procrastinate a little bit beforehand, but once things became urgent, you were forced to make a decision, you took action, and instead of doing the difficult work of choosing one thing to focus on, you convince yourself that multitasking is the better option. How do we know when we're doing this? Well, if you have more than 5 tabs, I'll just even go with 3 tabs open on your computer at any given time, and you're switching back and forth between them, you're multitasking. We also call it task switching. Now, when you're multitasking, you're not actually doing several things at the same time. What you're doing is shifting your voluntary attention back and forth between different tasks. Now, if you remember, we talked about effectiveness and efficiency. It's not an effective way to work. So during any single instant, you're concentrating on one thing or another. Have you ever been in the middle of writing an email and then somebody interrupts you? And when the conversation is over, you get back to the message. It takes you a few minutes to get your bearings to remember what it is you were writing, so you're back on track. Well, something similar happens when you're task switching, when you're multitasking. Astoundingly, it takes 23 minutes to fully regain your focus after switching tasks. There was an actual study that was published in a management, the International Journal of Information Management, that found a typical person checks email every 5 minutes, and that on average, it takes 64 seconds to resume the previous task after checking email. Now think about that in terms of texting and phone right now. Multitasking, this task switching, it forces us to pay a very mental price. Each time you interrupt one task and jump to another. And we want to avoid that tremendously. Multitasking is addictive. Our brains actually love it when we multitask because it feels like we're completing more than we actually are. And the truth is, training your mind to focus on one thing at a time will allow you to produce more meaningful results. Remember, effectiveness. So how do we overcome our tendency to multitask and focus on one thing at a time? Well, there are many options. We can know what to focus on. Remember, we talked about focus. How do we know where to direct our energy and attention? That's where to-do lists come in handy. How do you determine the one thing that you should be doing? Again, prioritization. And one way that mindfulness can help us improve this is when we're constantly going back and forth from one task to another, the quality of work can suffer. So by practicing this idea of mindfulness, simply coming back to the present moment over and over again, we can train ourselves to become more focused. Think of your attention as a spotlight. And if you were to shine a spotlight on one particular area, you see things very clearly. And if you try to spread that spotlight, the same amount of spotlight across a large dark room, you're only going to glimpse some of the shadowy outlines. So that's why improving your mental focus is all about making the most of the resources that you have available. So stop multitasking and give your full attention to one thing at a time. Now, a lot of us, we have to talk about our attitude. Let's first agree on what an interruption is. Anything that you didn't expect to happen and that delays or sidetracks you from what you were doing. Can we agree that that's an interruption or a good definition of an interruption? Can I see a show of hands? Thank you. I'll read it again. Anything that you didn't expect to happen and that delays or sidetracks you from what you were doing would be considered an interruption. Interruptions are, and thank you for your hands, I appreciate it. Interruptions are rarely intended to be disruptive. That makes sense because interruptions means to come between and break something. Rupt means break as in rupture, and not all interruptions are the same. Interruptions can take a lot of different forms. They can be hindering or they can be helpful. When we talk about distractions, well, distractions are reacting to a stimuli that disrupt. And then we have intrusions. Intrusions are, well, where you have not been invited. Let's put it that way. Intrusions, maybe an unexpected customer, an encounter, someone interrupts you, or unscheduled visits, anything that's going to cause you to feel like that kind of stress or anxiety. Now, breaks are also interruptions, but breaks can be spontaneous. If you're bored, if you're frustrated, you might take a break. So here it is, you're interrupting yourself almost as much as you're interrupted by other things. And we do this constantly throughout the day, almost 44% of the time. Now, breaks are good, right? Breaks help you regain your focus, but they certainly can be disruptive if we're taking breaks over an extended period of time. And that has a lot of negative consequences in terms of productivity. People that interrupt you, they have their own agenda. And it may or may not include considerations for your particular priorities. So your definition of interruptions may affect your attitude about being interrupted. And why is that important? Because we've got this brain circuitry, right? We're constantly switching between two states of awareness. We've got either being task positive, where we're actively focusing on a task, or task negative. That's the daydreaming and the thinking about other things. With the amount of time that interruptions occur in the workplace, and in this constant state of interruptions, it's no wonder that we have trouble ignoring those distractions. So if mindfulness means avoiding distractions, what is it that's distracting us from the present? Now, the best way to avoid distractions throughout the day is to make it harder for those distractions to get to you in the first place. Again, makes sense. And that means maybe for some of us, creating a relatively distraction-free environment where we can focus. Not easy to do when we're working from home and we've got children and spouses and pets and all of these other distractions. Email can be a distraction for some of us. And the distraction suppresses your ability to really hone in on one state of mind or another. You know the email is sitting there, and it may sap your resources because your brain keeps thinking about the email and it's distracting you from what it is you're doing. You know, is it good news? Is it bad news? Who's it from? What do I need to do? There is a solution. Not everybody is keen on it, but by not letting it take over your life, this email or this text, you treat it like any other individual project or task. You set it aside for specific periods of the day. Sometimes it's helpful to disable some of those notifications that pop up. And email is one of those time bandits that get in our way. For me, I have learned, and it took a really long time to do this, but I only look at my email first thing in the morning and later by 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That way it gives me time to answer anything, and people know, and I actually could have this in my signature, that that this is my process. So if it's something urgent, you pick up the phone and you call me. You don't wait for it to be in an email. So we've talked about mindfulness, we've talked about attention, we've talked about focus, the importance of, and the benefits of, and the limitations of focus. And we talked about your attitude toward interruptions. So if your attitude toward interruptions is, oh, another interruption, it is going to be very distracting for you in terms of productivity for the day. So we have all of these time bandits, things that steal our time. We've got texting, we've got emails, we've got phone, we've got LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram. And you know what? Maybe disable some of the notifications. Let's talk about email interruptions. Again, I mentioned that in terms of time and energy and attention, it all equals productivity. So you have to determine and decide how you're going to handle email distractions. For me, the easiest thing was to turn off those notifications and then to train myself accordingly. Interruptions, we all have attitudes about interruptions. Before I interrupt someone, I tend to process this information by asking myself, do I absolutely need this information now? Am I stuck on getting this information? What is the impact on me of not getting the information now? Is the impact of my interruption on someone else worse than not getting the information now? And is it related to what the other person is working on? So one of the questions that you want to pose to yourself is, if the interruption does concern giving information to someone, you may want to ask yourself another series of questions. Does this person absolutely need the information right now? Is it something that the person is working on right now? What's the impact if they don't get the information right now? How can I best communicate this information so that I don't interrupt, it's less hindering? So for example, an email may be your preferred method of communication, while going to that person's cubicle might be more intrusive. You also want to learn how to process your emails. This is really important. I didn't say learn how to check your email. I said learn how to process your email, and getting into the habit of processing your emails as soon as you open them is your single best weapon for fighting this never-ending process of getting emails. So what does it mean to process your email? You either delete it. So some emails are not actionable. You may just want to delete it. Some emails are going to trigger an action that needs to be taken, so you want to delegate. You might want to respond, because some emails are going to require you to respond to the sender. You want to keep it short and concise, under 5 sentences. And if you can do that, then go ahead and reply to the email right then. You could do something, you could reply or act immediately. If it takes less than a minute in terms of productivity, you could put it on your to-do list. If you need to write something that's going to take longer, or you could put it on your calendar, or you can archive it. So that's what I mean by processing emails. And I'm sure we all have questions about that. But I'm going to talk about, for those of you who have multiple bosses, one thing that you want to be able to do with multiple bosses is set expectations. Identify what your boss is sensitive about. You want to under promise and over deliver. Clarify what the expectations are for you. Have that conversation, and then shape their perception of what you can and cannot get done. And especially if there are competing priorities, you need to make your boundaries known. One big thing that you need to be able to do is not only with your bosses, but your coworkers. Let them know what your boundaries are. And if we're working from home and one of your boundaries is, I'm not going to pick up the phone every time it rings because I've got all of these other things going on, explain that this is how you maintain your work-life balance, and have those conversations. Boundaries are really, really important. It's really so very important to your productivity to make your boundaries known. You don't want to say yes to everything. And we do this. We say yes because you want to be viewed as that go-to person, that team player. Trouble is, agreeing to work on too many things is going to stretch you out and leave you stressed. So if saying no was easy, then Harvard would not have an entire course on just saying no. And it's true that we find no hard because we have this fear or this guilt, or we're nervous that, hey, if I say no to my boss. But no is not no. No is just no, not now. It's not a no forever. It's a no, just not right now. So the idea of saying no is you're saying yes to the person, but no to the project. So saying no to too many things obviously is going to be counterproductive. Asserting yourself doesn't mean that you can't say yes, but you should have a definitive system to be able to say no in a way that feels right, which means you should be straightforward. Be candid about why you're saying no. It could be, I have to be able to get this done by 3 o'clock today, and after that, I can give you an hour. So it's a compromise. Saying yes to the person but no to the task generally involves a conversation rather than this just one sentence response, which is no. So valuing your time and saying no is a really good opportunity. Micromanagers, when you're working with a micromanager, they're effectively doing 3 things. They're undermining, demotivating, and creating self-doubt. So we want to make sure that when we're working with a micromanager, that we're being proactive and doing things in advance so that they're not hovering. Maybe give them a list up front about what it is you're working on. I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about procrastination. Why do we procrastinate? Well, any number of reasons. Tasks seem overwhelming, or they're boring, or we're fearful of the task. Either way, procrastinating, you're not going to get your best work done. So we want to make sure that we all have times we're up against deadlines, but that doesn't mean that we're always doing our best work at the last minute. I mentioned procrastination. I mentioned circadian rhythms. We all have that well-defined internal clock that shapes our energy levels throughout the day. And by aligning your work habits with your natural cycle, we can optimize our daily productivity. The ideal rhythm is to work 4 90-minute chunks throughout the day with 20-minute breaks in between. And again, we want to avoid distractions, and you need those mental 20-minute breaks. So make sure to take them. Noise is a very powerful distractor. Eliminating or minimizing noise can have immediate benefits for your focus and your memory. Not all of us can work in silence, but we can perhaps maybe listen to music. Choose something that's not too intense, something that doesn't have lyrics so that you're not distracted by them. If you can get those noise canceling headphones. And music does help us to concentrate. But again, you want to make sure it's lyric free and sort of soothing. We're easily distracted. Whenever you're on Zoom and a new person talks or something, try this. Set a timer to go off every hour. When it goes off, stop and take a deep breath and commit to how you're going to use the next hour is another technique. there are techniques for Zoom, minimizing the window, managing your time, managing your focus, managing your energy are definitely 3 factors that have to do with productivity. And there is a question from Monique. How do you stay focused and get your startup business back on track when circumstances are out of hand? For example, computer goes down and it takes 6 weeks to get a new computer from HP. This can be very stressful when the computer is one of the main resources in your business. It's a distraction, intrusion, and disruption. I tried to full-time this by attending webinars, working my business, but I was constantly reminded of this intrusion because the computer was needed to make tasks easier. Okay, so Monique, I'm going to defer the question just momentarily, but sometimes using your smartphone is another way or another alternative to get stuff done. So maybe some of those apps that you have or that you can put on your phone. We want to be able to manage our energy at the same time. We want to be able to clarify our tasks. So concentration is really important. It allows us to focus on those tasks, but be clear about exactly what the task is. Every task should begin with a verb. And if it's not a verb, then it shouldn't be anything that you can do. So maybe I can say the techniques that they can use will be on the slides. They can go back and see it on the recording. Okay, well, certainly the Pareto principle is another opportunity. This concept is 20% of the input creates 80% of the result. So this concept suggests that 2 out of 10 items on any to-do list will turn out to be worth more than the other 8 items together. So you can often focus your efforts on the 20% that make the most difference. The way you do that is prioritize. You want to identify urgent versus important. And the way we can do that is mapping your day. So I'm going to be able, I understand that there are questions and I'm supposed to take the time to answer those questions with respect to the deck. There is a visual time management tool. There's time locking. There's the Swiss cheese technique. There's the Pomodoro technique. There is the Sting method. Prioritization, you can use the Eisenhower matrix. And these will all be in your deck. You want to be able to refocus. And one way that we can refocus is sometimes doodling or fidgeting or even chewing gum. We want to make sure that we accept that interruptions happen every day and they often cause delays. But if you mentally prepare for being interrupted, you're less likely to become that frustrated. And it may seem counterintuitive as interruptions by their very nature are unplanned, but by planning for them, we're able to curb our stress. So I understand that I'm supposed to leave time for additional questions, so I will turn it back to Bill.
Yeah, Audrey, there's one question. I know you were dealing with Monique, that she had a question about, she tried full-time attending webinars and things like that. Any suggestions for her?
Yes, I think I mentioned that one thing that Monique can do is use her smartphone in terms of creating productivity outlines or tasks. Use your smartphone in lieu of a computer in terms of making lists or identifying what those tasks are that need to get prioritized that don't require a computer. That would be helpful.
Great. Okay, you may want to go to the next slide if you would. And there's some great tools and techniques that are on the slides that you can view on the recording. So please avail yourself of that. And again, I want to thank everybody for attending today. And again, I think there's one more slide, Audrey. Yep. And just remember that SCORE is funded through SBA, and there's a lot of great programs. And again, there's a lot of recordings that you can avail yourself of besides this, or in addition to this one. And another thing is, if you need a mentor, if you need somebody's personal help, please contact SCORE Westchester, and they'll help you find one. So again, I want to thank everybody. It looks like we're at the top of the hour. So I want to thank everybody for attending. And I want you to fill out your mentor request if you'd like it. And in the chat, and I don't know if that is something that's available to everybody, to contact SCORE. So Raquel, could you let me know if that's available, what you're putting in chat, or you want me to do something with it?
Yeah, so Noelle just posted a link. Everyone can see that link. So if you're interested in SCORE mentorship, go ahead and click that and fill out the form.
Great. Again, thank you, and thanks for all your help. And Audrey, terrific presentation. Really appreciate it.
Thanks everyone for attending. Stay safe, and it will get better, I promise.